Hello, I'm W.T. Edmonson, and welcome to Focus ITLT. Freedom often causes unbelievable silence in times like these. Masonry is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, existing fraternal organization known today. Masonry has the distinction of having been called a mysterious secret organization. I have been asking our guests over time, spoke with past Grand Master Michael Johnson and a few other individuals about this subject, secrecy and masonry. Record shows masonry goes back to the 1700s. In 1784, the Grand Lodge of England granted a charter to the African Lodge number 1, which was later named African Lodge number 459. In 2013, as I indicated, I sat with past Grand Master Michael Trent Johnson, past Grand Master of Prince Hall Masons, that is. He was an individual that was very steeped in masonry and knowing the history of masonry. So when I wanted to update our information, we have a current Grand Master who is also steeped in history of masonry. So our guest today is none other than the most wishful Grand Master Prince Hall Masons of Missouri, Malcolm Morris. Welcome to Focus ITLT, Brother Morris.
Good morning, Reverend Edmonson.
All right. Well, look, I said, we won't waste a lot of time. We're going to get right into it. I have known you and we have known each other for quite a number of years. But share with the audience that will be viewing your personal background as well as your professional background.
Well, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. We have always been community-minded, service-minded, a family. My family has been involved in the Masonic fraternity since 1864 in a complete male unbroken line. So it was just a natural progression for me to become a member of this great organization.
It is said that Masonry is a secret organization. Why the mystery of Masonry being a secret society?
First, let's dispel the secret society scenario. We are not a secret society. We're a society that has secrets, like the Boy Scouts, Campfire Girls, any organization that has an exclusive membership. They have certain modes of recognition. The Boy Scouts have a particular handshake, which you can look up just like you can look up our information. That doesn't make you a Boy Scout by knowing it. It just simply says that we have an organization and these are our modes of recognition. That is the greatest secret in Masonry.
In the intro, I shared a little bit about the origin of Prince Hall Masonry. Can you expound on that and why Prince Hall felt the necessity, first of all, to become a Mason, and then to have felt the need to petition the Grand Lodge of England for the establishment of a lodge?
Quite simply, first off, the Masonic fraternity, black or white, in the American colonies was used basically as a training ground for civil servants, a place where men could gather and learn how to do public speaking, learn how to run a community chest for the betterment of the town. And as far as Prince Hall Freemasonry, Prince Hall and his compatriots realized that they were being underrepresented as free men of color in the city of Boston when they simply petitioned the Commonwealth of Boston to have children of color receive primary educations. And at that time, they were just turned down. So that was the beginning of what we now know as the Civil Rights Movement. Prince Hall Freemasons, or Freemasons of color within the United States, have always been on the forefront for equal rights for people of color, as well as promoting and generating African-American businesses, African-American political interest. The primary founders of the NAACP were Prince Hall Freemasons. A lot of times people get things confused by, oh, well, people of Jewish extraction created the NAACP, but one must remember that during that time, if you were considered non-white or not white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, you were a Freemason, up to and including people of the Jewish persuasion up until the mid-20s.
Talking about Prince Hall petitioning Boston for establishment of a lodge, could you explain for those who may not know the difference in free and accepted Masons and ancient free and accepted Masons?
That is kind of a tight answer. In the beginning, all Masonic entities were ancient, free, and accepted. But during the 20s, our right to exist as a Masonic fraternity was challenged. And it was challenged because by being non-Anglo-Saxon and Protestant, it was perceived that we did not possess the basic intelligence level to be Freemasons. So a case was brought against all Freemasons of color in, I believe it was 1924, by the Shriners. And it was an attempt for the mainstream or non-white Masons to legally say that we could not represent ourselves as Freemasons. Well, of course, that case was lost, and Prince Hall Masonry did prevail. And that is why, to this day, all Prince Hall Freemasons, most especially Prince Hall Freemasons that are Shriners, celebrate Jubilee Day. And that was the date when the court said, yes, as men of color, we possess the intelligence to know the operative skills and the language of Freemasonry, and our right to exist was preserved by the Supreme Court.
In Masonry, there was what was known as non-recognition. What was and what is non-recognition, and how prevalent is that today?
Non-recognition was, again, as I referred, we won the court case, but many mainstream or Caucasian Grand Lodges refused to recognize men of color as Freemasons, even within their own states. It has not been but in the last 25 years that those barriers have been coming down. Missouri, the jurisdiction of Missouri AF and AM, as well as F and AM, which are what Prince Hall Masons are, free and accepted. We do not carry the ancient title anymore because we are not ancient by their standards. So we are free and accepted Masons. But we have made great strides in the last 25 years as far as participating with each other and getting to know each other. and dispelling some of the old myths that people of color should only be members of the fraternity when they need a spook by the door.
Mm, mm. There's a history of some preachers alleging Freemasonry was a cult. Where did this allegation come from, and is it continuously being perpetrated?
Freemasonry is been misconstrued as a cult by a lot of ministers that have either heard that we are evil people or that we are not Christians. The worst kept secret in Masonry, which a lot of people refuse to acknowledge, is the fact that one of the basic precepts is you cannot be an atheist and be a Freemason. Years and years ago, if most ministers study the history of the AME Church, you will find that predominantly all the founding members of the AME Church were Prince Hall Freemasons. It was virtually impossible to become an AME minister until the 50s unless you were a Freemason. And in the Deep South, it is virtually impossible for you to become a pastor of a church without being a Freemason, because of the rules of conduct and the morality that we hold in such high esteem.
Let's turn to Prince Hall Masonry in the state of Missouri. How did Prince Hall Masonry find its way to the state of Missouri?
The Prince Hall Freemasonry in the state of Missouri can very simply be categorized by the history of the Underground Railroad. All your major conductors of the Missouri Underground Railroad were Prince Hall Freemasons. And with that, the three primary conductors of the Underground Railroad in Missouri, one was a Baptist minister, which was Reverend Moses Dixon. Moses Dixon was an AME minister. Reverend Amos Johnson from Columbia, Missouri, was a Baptist minister. And Reverend Thomas W. Dringer, out of Ohio jurisdiction, was also an AME minister. And they were the three primary conductors of the Underground Railroad in the state of Missouri, and went on to found a more militant group with the assistance of John Brown, which were called the Knights of Tabor. A lot of people forget that the connections of Missouri Freemasonry were strongly connected to John Brown.
Okay, go ahead, share a little bit more.
Which it's really funny because, as many of your viewers would be familiar with the movie Glory about the 54th Massachusetts, that's not exactly historically accurate. The first African-American unit to fight Confederates in the Civil War was the 1st Kansas Colored. That battle happened in Butler, Missouri. And that was the first and only time prior to Harry Truman's desegregation order. It was the first and only time you had African-American field grade officers in command of infantry troops in a battle. They won the battle, and then because that was unacceptable, all those Black officers were offered the opportunity to become first sergeants or be shipped to the Home Guard in New Orleans, Louisiana, if they wanted to maintain their rank. So just Missouri has a very interesting history in regard to the struggle and in regard to the civil rights movement. A lot of people forget that we are the northernmost state south of the Mason-Dixon line, and that Missouri had a very, very sizable slave population.
Can you share a little bit about those ministers that you just spoke of?
The first one, let's start with Thomas W. Stringer. Thomas W. Stringer was a barber, worked on the Mississippi. His code name was Blue. So he would go down the Mississippi on a paddle wheel, cutting people's hair, and then he would box up certain slaves and come back up the Mississippi and uncrate them in Galena, Illinois, and let them go to freedom. He also went on to found the Grand Lodge of Louisiana, Florida, and Mississippi. And then you had Reverend Moses Dixon, who was a real jewel because he was what they call a circuit rider. And he established AME churches between Missouri, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, and New Mexico, as well, and Kansas. And Masonry followed him. Everywhere he established an AME church, he established a Masonic lodge. So we are very proud of what he's done, and he's also featured on the website for the state of Missouri as one of the most influential Missourians of all time. The gentleman, Reverend Amos Johnson, my namesake, who you're very familiar with, not only did he help people of color after slavery to start independent businesses so that they could be self-reliant, he founded Second Baptist Church in Columbia, Missouri, and it is still the largest African-American presence in downtown Columbia to this day. Mm. He went on to spread Freemasonry to Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, and North Dakota. So we have just a fantastic history of a Masonic presence here in Missouri, most especially in your area. We have Deputy Grand Master Thomas Bass. Y'all have the Blind Boone Community Center. A lot of people know he's past potentate to Allah Temple. How can a blind man be a Mason? Amazing, isn't it? So we have so much to be proud of in our area, but we have just never exposed ourselves to these things. We have a magnificent history.
Mm-hmm. What efforts is there efforts to capture this history to ensure that not only young men coming into Masonry, but community at large understands and have access to this history?
We are starting now to catalog our history. Like a lot of organizations, we just weren't that good at it. And we did not realize the importance of it when the things were happening. Not a lot of Freemasons are aware that just right across the river, over in Kansas City, Kansas, all of us have heard about Brown versus the Board of Education. But what a lot of people don't know is that that was funded by, the funding was spearheaded by past Grand Master, I believe his name was T. Roosevelt Butler out of Kansas City, Kansas, who was the Grand Master of the jurisdiction in Kansas. And he reached out to another Prince Hall Mason to represent the Brown family in the case, in the person of Thurgood Marshall. A lot of people don't know that Thurgood Marshall was not only a Prince Hall Freemason, but he was an active Sovereign Grand Inspector General, or 33rd degree Mason.
As we talk about Prince Hall involvement with civil rights and human rights, what is the status of Prince Hall Mason's involvement? There's so much going on in society today, and on all different fronts. What is the involvement in general of Prince Hall Masons in the struggle today?
As our organization has evolved to mirror our AF and AM counterparts, we have strived to be apolitical. Unfortunately, under this administration, I have had to remind our brothers of the historical aspects of actually what Prince Hall Freemasonry is and does. We have been on the forefronts of voters' rights, of trying to introduce candidates into a political system that will be more favorable to us. Yes, we know that we are admonished not to speak on politics in our lodges, which all Freemasons are required not to do. But in the same sentence, we are responsible to and for our community, and we are the first line. We are the ones that have funded all the civil rights agendas. We just lost another paragon, John Lewis. And the sad part about it is everything that John Lewis and his fellows suffered is being overturned now. And it is now time for us as a fraternity and as an organization to get back on the front lines and do the things that we were originally established to do by our founder, Prince Hall, which is the propagation, the enhancement, and the education of people of color, not just African Americans, but people of color. Anybody that's non-white is welcome into our organization. Even people that are white Anglo-Saxon Protestant are welcome into our organization. But our original mandate is to uplift and upgrade our community by social activity. And by social activity, that includes politics.
As we think about the involvement, what is the process of individuals joining Prince Hall Masons today? I know at one time, if you didn't have family ties, it was very difficult for you to get in. What's the status of that today?
Well, as you remember when we came through, either somebody in your family or to be one, ask one was the rule. We have, under this administration, modified that a little bit. We are now actively talking about the history of the Missouri Grand Lodge, what it has meant to people of color in the state of Missouri, and why it is important for this organization to continue on. We're the only organization for people of color where you can make an immediate impact in your community just by volunteering, just by simply volunteering. Be that as a mentor, assisting people to register to vote, being a good church member. We are focusing on all that. And as we speak now, and as you're well aware, I went through a little rough patch when I told brothers, I'm going to start asking brothers to be Masons, because I need the guys that I go to church with, the guys that I work with, to be interested in this organization, not somebody that's at the local watering hole saying I want to be a Mason. That's not where I want to find men that will be responsible to and for their community.
Okay, you spoke about the church. I understand you're a good Catholic.
Yes.
There has been some conversations on YouTube and so forth about not only Masonry and Catholics and so forth, but your name have come up. What's going on with that?
Sometimes people with new and shiny toys need to do their homework. I do have the great privilege of being the first Catholic Grand Master in the history of our Grand Lodge. Catholicism and Freemasonry did not mix. I think that's more of a mental control factor than anything else. and that has permeated down into the other religions, the Baptist religion, this, that, and the other, following popes with private agendas. The problem with a lot of misunderstanding in religion about Freemasonry is the fact that people think that we are atheists, and you cannot be an atheist and be a Freemason. It's just, it just won't work. But we do accept men of all faiths. The origins of many of our faiths resonate within Prince Hall Freemasonry. As I mentioned, the AME Church was one of the strongest promoters of Prince Hall Freemasonry. And one of the things that a lot of people don't know, and it may be a bad word, but Baruch Muhammad was a Prince Hall Freemason before he created the Nation of Islam. To this day, a lot of Muslims have no idea why they wear bow ties. And neither do a lot of Prince Hall Freemasons. When I became Grand Master, I mandated that all Prince Hall Freemasons in official dress will wear bow ties as a reminder of where we came from.
You spoke briefly about the type of men that you would seek out and speak to about Masonry. Why is morals, ethics, and the Masonic philosophy so important for membership?
You have to have a severe moral compass to be involved with our organization, because you would challenge yourself as a man. Nobody will have to tell you what is right and what is wrong. As a good God-fearing man, and when you receive some of the lessons of Freemasonry, you will slowly notice that your opinion and your actions, privately and publicly, will change. Because now you're starting to build an internal spiritual temple and be the type of person, or try to emulate what the Creator put us here for, which is to be a good person, to take care of your family, to work and contribute to your community. And the more of our young men that see that, maybe it'll cut down on some of the bad things that we've been seeing recently in our society. So we have to get our message out there. It's imperative. I'm tired of burying kids.
I was just getting ready to touch on that. Why did you make that decision about gun violence and coming to your funeral establishment for burial?
I have been a funeral director for 25 years. It's just been in the last 4 to 5 years that it has been okay for children to be murder victims, for children to murder children, for parents to allow aberrant behavior in their children, and then they're upset when your child is no longer on earth. Well, if you allowed them to come home in the 9th grade and tell you that they're not going to school anymore, and they're driving brand new cars with no job, and then you come and say, Mr. Morris, I need your help to bury my child. You knew what they were doing was wrong. You let them continue to live in your house, and you held them not accountable for their actions. At some point, enough is enough. Somebody has to start being responsible. If you know that you can't get a glorious funeral and use Facebook to get donations to pay for your child's funeral, then maybe the next one you'll be a little bit more observant and a little bit more strict with. The way we came up, we had the village concept. But when children started having children, an adult can't argue with the child to correct another child. And that's where the disconnect comes.
Young people aren't standing in line these days to seek fraternal organizations as they did in the past. How does this organization go about promoting the organization and membership without the hardcore recruiting?
We can't. We're past that stage now. The best way for us to do hardcore recruiting is to come from behind the four walls, stop going to a meeting and closing the public out, and leave that meeting and go and do something in the community. We have been very fortunate to have brothers like you involved in the organization that has had vision. We have been able to give away over the last 20 years in excess of $80,000 for college scholarships. Again, we are doing something new to bring us from outside the walls and maybe attract young college students. And you will be happy to know this, brother interviewer. This year, for the first time in the history of our Grand Lodge, we will be endowing a college, not just giving a scholarship, but placing a permanent endowment in one of Missouri's HBCUs. We need to put a better face on what we do and just stop telling people that we're the best that our community has to offer, and then nobody sees us. We need to participate in political forums. We need to get out in the community. We need to go visit churches more. We need to sponsor more youth activities. All of these things we are starting to do now. And I'm very proud that the membership is receiving this well and taking full advantage. I am so pleased with our growth over the last 3 years. We have increased our membership by 12%. And one of the things that very few grandmasters have the opportunity to do these days since the 20s is charter new lodges. And I've been able to charter 3 new lodges within the state of Missouri. I am immensely proud of that and just pleased with you brothers that have helped this situation to happen.
This has always been very, very, what do I want to say? It has been very troubling to me over time. As I indicated, these days, lodges are not what they used to be in Missouri. We've lost a lot of lodges. And at the same time, some of the lodges that continue to exist appear to be holding on. What can the Grand Lodge do to shore up these local lodges, to assist them in broadening their base, promoting themselves better, getting out in the community and so forth, promoting themselves to the point where individuals in the communities really have a new eye on Masonry?
And as you know, brother interviewer, this administration has tried to do numerous things. We have stopped focusing so much on the main 2 cities in the state of Missouri, which is focusing efforts in Kansas City as well as St. Louis. We are now focusing our efforts on smaller towns where we are able to get a little bit better traction. So we are doing more things in the smaller communities. And one of the greatest things is we're the old men now, WT. I am the oldest man in my line. Our next Grandmaster will be 54. We probably won't have a Grandmaster over 55 for a number of years. So hopefully with their knowledge, with their training, they will attract young people. as well as the things that we've been doing more recently by getting out in the community more and by looking for the right, for lack of a better word, situation in which to put ourselves in a favorable light in the community. As far as the local lodges and things, we have went back to, you guys check on your senior people, your senior members. That's going to be your greatest wealth of recruitment, is the way that you treat your senior members. They have children, grandchildren, nephews, nieces. If we do the right things that Masonry has taught us by taking care of our young people as well as our seniors, we should have no problems with being successful, but we have to go back to what made us strong and successful. Taking care of our seniors, taking care of our youth, and taking care of our spiritual aspects, which is participating in church.
Some fraternal organizations over the years have found themselves having to address hazing. Prince Hall Masonry, it's a different organization than college fraternities, but young people today don't know the difference. Speak to that a little bit.
Well, as when we came through, they did have that system. But as all of us grow older and wiser, you come to realize that you can't haze a grown man. That's not a good thing. And so what we do is we teach the lessons, not in a physical way as we once did, but give you food for thought and mentorship so that you understand what Prince Hall Freemasonry is, why it's so important to our community. But every aspect of Freemasonry you're not hazed in anymore. That's a thing of the past. It's too dangerous, number one. And number two, as a man, and when I was going through it, I personally felt it was disrespectful because I'm a grown man. But we made it through, and we were able to make positive change so that nobody else feels that way. We continue to evolve.
How has COVID-19 pandemic impacted the organization?
It has been as rough on us as most other fraternal and/or volunteer organizations. And one of the things, as we were sharing about being accountable and responsible, the minute that the pandemic hit, we set aside certain funds for assistance of not only our members, but our members' families, so that anyone that had received that diagnosis, we made foodstuffs and monies available within 24 hours, just so that they could start their confinement without having to worry about, do I have enough groceries, this, that, and the other. We funded that with approximately about 35,000, and we have expended all but about $1,900 of it. But the number of families, as far as Masonic families we service, as well as their extended families that we service, it was pretty good. We sent money all around the country.
Okay. Coming to a close, you are about to complete your tenure as Grand Master Prince Hall Masons in the state of Missouri. What have you learned? What do you wish you have known going in? And what do you think has been your greatest achievement?
What I've learned is to be a lot more patient. Just that's the major thing, is learning to be a lot more patient. and the fact that we have not came as far as I've wanted to come as far as us being politically involved, because right now that is what's most important and what's most needed in our state. We're losing voter credibility at an alarming rate. And we were so proud a few years ago when we were actually able to get the vote out, not only to elect the first African-American sheriff of Jackson County, but also to support the election of an African-American city manager here in Kansas City. We have lost some things along the way, but I think that we're coming to a little bit better realization that if we continue not to be active in the political arena, then we're going to lose all the traction that our forebears spent so much money and effort to get started. So hopefully we will continue on, and we will continue to be a little bit better presence in Jefferson City, as you and I have spoken about. We still are trying to move that project forward. As far as the greatest accomplishment that I've had is, again, we have been able to move our membership up by 12%, and that's a steady 12%. We have not lost, but maybe 1.5% through attrition. So I'm very happy, because with the new projects and programs that we're running, brothers do see value in what we're doing. And as long as we can continue to give them that education, and as you said earlier, start to chronologize our history, which is what I'm looking forward to doing next, which is being the master of the Lodge of Research. I just really want to get back to learning our history and sharing our history with our young brothers. One of the things that a lot of people are not aware of, do you remember the Capitol insurrection? One of the things that a lot of people missed was, remember the African-American guard that was standing at the top of the steps holding his hand out, and right above the protesters, there was a photo, and a lot of people didn't know who that photo was of. That was a photo of Blanche K. Bruce, the first African-American treasurer of the United States. And he was from New Brunswick, Missouri.
All right.
He later on went to be Grand Master of Mississippi. So we have a good Missouri history.
Yeah. Share a little bit before we close. The status of Eastern Star with Prince Hall Masons. How is that going?
We have seen some growth aspects in the Order of the Eastern Star, which are our female counterparts. We are getting our word out there. One of our largest challenges now, and it goes back to the pastoral aspect, with Masonry being a secret organization, same goes for the Order of the Eastern Star, but any minister worth his salt will look in 2nd Matthew and he'll know what they are.
Mm-hmm.
So without giving too many of their secrets away, yes, it is a ladies' Christian organization.
Okay, alrighty. Well, thank you for taking the time to join us and share a little bit. We wanted to bring you in and have a few words with you before you step aside and the organization take on new leadership. We, first of all, appreciate your initiative, your accomplishments, and your tenacity. And it has taken quite a bit of tenacity over the past 3 years. So, Malcolm Morris, we have been speaking with past, I'm already making you past Grand Master. Not yet. I've been speaking with Grandmaster Malcolm Morris, Prince Hall Masons of the state of Missouri. Thank you very much for the time. We appreciate your efforts, and I'm sure that you won't step too far away. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Reverend.
All right.